Good evening, everyone. I'm back with Elaine Ellinger, and we're going to be having a very interesting discussion about stealth jihad in the workplace. And this is part of a broader problem where we are now discovering that there are Muslim networks, where they are mentoring, where they are bringing other Muslims into government services, social services, and so on. And they are entrenching themselves, making sure that people who follow the same ideology, the same group, is now embedding themselves within government and slowly supplanting and replacing the locals. And this is a serious problem. So jihad takes on many forms, and this is a very insidious form. It's happening in the UK, it's happening in the US, and hopefully we can do something about this. So welcome back, Elaine. Good to see you again.
Well, thank you very much, Lloyd. Really nice to be here today.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, do you want to kick us off and tell us what it is that you've been up to and what the topic, just tell the audience more about the topic.
Well, I connected with a group in France, and it was through a former colleague, and they were doing some very interesting work, and I read their book. And it was amazing to me the amount of infiltration that had taken place in the workplace and how it had been accomplished. So I wrote to them and I said, look, this book is fascinating and I would like to make it into a presentation. What do you think? Are you okay with that? And they said, go ahead. So I did. And I'll get to that book as we go through the presentation. But it identified 10 areas of the workplace that are challenges for employers and why they are challenges. So that's what it's going to be about.
Okay, do you want to give us a bit more information? So what's the main issue?
What I'd like to do is share my presentation and get started with that.
Sure. Yeah.
Rather than just talk about it. Okay. So I can just go ahead and share now?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to try.
Yeah, so just launch your presentation and then share the screen.
Yeah, that would definitely be best. Okay. Share entire screen. It's not doing it. Share screen. Allow. Okay. What do I want to do? I want to.
You just shared your screen twice, but so share your presentation because.
Okay, so I should be able to just go to it. Is that it?
Yeah, just
like that. Can you see it?
No.
Oh, brother.
It's showing up, Elaine.
Okay, so you have got it now.
It's there.
You got it?
Yes, Elaine.
Okay, I can't see you, but anyway, I'll just go ahead with this, and I'll go back. Okay, so this is about Islam at the workplace and in non-Islamic countries. It would be nice if I can see you. That seems kind of weird. Aren't I supposed to be able to see you, Lloyd?
You can go back into the studio, but then you won't be able to change the slides because you only have one screen.
All right. So I know you're there. So yeah, so I'll begin with the text that I use. These are the foundational texts of Islam. We have the Quran, which your people are all familiar with, Bukhari, the Hadith about Muhammad, and to put it all in context, the life of Muhammad. And this is a very good one from the 8th century. This is Ibn Ishaq's work. And you need Ibn Ishaq to put everything in context because the Quran is not in chronological order. And in Islam, all human activity, legal, moral, ethical, falls into one of 5 specific categories. And it is obligatory if Muhammad said you have to do it. It's recommended if he liked it, permitted, discouraged, and forbidden if he said don't do it. But altogether, this forms the Sunnah of Muhammad, and the Quran, this is Sharia. Now, Sharia it is really weird not being able to see you. Okay, so Sharia is everything that's in the Quran and the Hadith of Muhammad, but it's compiled in this book you see here called Reliance of the Traveler. And in Reliance of the Traveler, things that are well known in Sharia are compiled, and your group is very familiar with that. The word Sharia is in the Quran, and it's here on the clear way of faith. I do wish we could change this setting somehow so I could see you. There's no way to fix this?
You only have one screen. I've got multiple screens, so I can do that. In this case, you can either share your presentation screen, but then you can change slides, or you can go back to the studio screen, but then you can't change the slides. Unless you have two monitors, you will have difficulty.
Oh, okay, because last time I thought I could see you. All right. So what is the follower required to believe? It's that everything that comes from Allah and Muhammad, they don't have any choice in that. They are the experts, and those are the authorities that I stick with. There are others, okay, consensus of companions, etc. And some of those are found, of course, in the Reliance of the Traveler, the Compendium of Islamic Law. And the reason we want to know about this is because so much of the doctrine is about the non-Muslim. This statistical work was done by Dr. Bill Warner, and I replicated the Quran on my own, and more than half of it is about the non-Muslim. We need to know what it says because it's bad news.
Yeah, don't rush through the slides, because I think you're rushing a bit. You can take your time to go through and detail each slide, because you're kind of very cursorily just mentioning it and then moving on. And I know from a fact that doing hundreds of presentations and thousands of them probably by now, that people don't remember what they saw on the screen and don't take the time to read it. So go back rather and explain the terms, explain the words. We can't assume that everyone knows what those terms are.
Yeah, I rather thought your audience would be familiar with this, and I
don't make the assumption, because it's good to reinforce information by repeating.
All right. Well, I'll just make sure that everybody's got it. The Quran is the main text everybody knows. The Hadith are the stories and traditions about Muhammad, and he is the messenger of Allah. Every word in the Quran came out of his mouth. So Muhammad is extremely important. And I don't know if they're going to be able to see me either. I'm waving my hands around here.
Everyone can see you too.
Oh, they can see me. Okay. So the Sirah is the life of Muhammad. And it's important to have a very good one, because his life is being rewritten these days. For instance, there's a museum, it's the Islamic Museum of Australia. And on the wall, they have a biography of Muhammad. But you can't, there's not one drop of blood on that wall. It says that he was a lovely man. He was married to Khadija. It doesn't mention the other 12 wives. So this is Bowdlerizing. It's removing information that's inconvenient. And so it's really important to have a good biography. And like I say, the Quran is not in chronological order. So unless you know his life, you will never understand Islam by just reading the Quran.
Mm-hmm.
And because he is so important, everything he said it's either obligatory because he said it, it's recommended because it was done around him and he thought it was a good thing, permitted because he didn't care, discouraged because he wasn't crazy about it, and forbidden if he didn't like it and said, don't do that. So this is very important in Islam, that obligatory things, anything in this half is halal, and down here, this is haram. Don't do that. So this applies to everything in life, though. All human activity, legal, moral, ethical, it is all found here, and it is all found in the Quran and the Hadith of Muhammad, the Sunnah. So because it's very complicated to go through all of this every time you need an answer to a simple question, many of the things that are well known have been analyzed, and they're compiled in a book called Reliance of the Traveler. It's a classic manual of Islamic law. And so I'll refer to that a few times as we go through the presentation. The word Sharia is in the Quran, and this is the clear way of faith. They are to follow Muhammad. So I'll have a drink here.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So now we'll get back to it. So the people don't have any choice in this. The Quran says, when Allah and his messenger have decided a matter, no believer, male or female, has a choice in their affair. And you find this in Reliance of the Traveler, the classic manual of Islamic law. It says the same thing. None of you believes until his inclinations conform to what I have brought. Knowledge is actually discouraged in Islam. It is expected that for the average person, they will simply accept what came from Allah and his messenger and not question it. Questioning can get you in a lot of trouble.
It leads to apostasy, and apostasy.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Doubts Oh, it may creep into your mind. I think it says something about, doubts that are hard to expel may creep into your mind. Heaven forbid, we don't want any of that. So the Quran and Hadith, that's what I usually use because, well, it is what I use because nobody can gainsay it. This is, as far as Islam is concerned, this is truth. And then the companions and things like that, these are used in legal cases to a certain extent, but the highest authority are the Quran and Hadith, Muhammad. So as I mentioned, more than half the Quran is about the non-Muslims, so it's very important we know what it says.
Just go back a bit. Just go back a slide, yeah. So the Sirah is obviously the biographies. It's effectively the Gospels of Muhammad. They sort of work as Muhammad's Gospels, similar to what we have of Jesus' life, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But this is obviously a massive volume. And on this point, I said yesterday to the audience that, we wake up in the morning and we think about our day. What we need to understand is because Islam and the Sharia, because the Sharia teaches that Muslims are to command the right and forbid the wrong. In other words, they're to impose the Sharia and prevent violations of the Sharia, whether you are a Muslim or a non-Muslim. Therefore, the Muslims wake up in the morning and they too think about your day and how they're going to change it for you. So this is controlling, this is totalitarian. And this is simply why it focuses so much not on teaching Islam, but teaching against the non-believers. I mean, that's a massive amount of teaching against the unbeliever.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it is really everything. Even, well, I'll get into it later, but even what toothbrush you are supposed to use.
Yeah.
The amount of control is phenomenal. People have no idea. And that's one of the problems too when it comes to the workplace is that, accommodation is made for this and for this. It will never end because Sharia never ends.
I just want to respond to this comment by Rob K. There are only two experts when it comes to Islam. Allah, as stated in the Quran, and Muhammad is told in Hadiths. That's 100% wrong. That's a quote by Bill Warner. And, you must understand that Muslims are taught Islam by their scholars. And the Quran is a book that lacks a lot of detail. So, for instance, go in the Quran and show me on which page it mentions the list of Muhammad's wives. Good luck if you can find it there. Show me where it tells you how to do the 5 daily prayers. It's not in there.
No, it's not.
So there's a great deal of information that is absolutely and completely missing. This information must come from third-party sources outside of the Quran, so extra Quranic sources. So unfortunately, all that this statement does is it says, so when you introduce the Sharia, which is a complete legal corpus, which competes, it's hundreds of pages, thousands of pages, dozens of volumes, it competes with Western law and wants to replace it, then you're simply giving Muslims permission to say, well, that's not the Quran, we can ignore it, and they can gaslight you. So unfortunately, I know Bill Warner is very well-intentioned, but unfortunately, this one needs to be thought through because there's a great deal you're not going to find in the Quran. But for instance, the Quran teaches chop off their hands. That's nice. Show me the full detail, all of the legal involvement, all of the legal discussions, all of the case law. It's not in the Quran. But I can show you 60 pages in the Sharia that goes in detail through exactly what is involved with amputation.
Yes.
So do I go to the Quran or do I go to the Sharia? See?
Yes.
So you need to just be careful with making these broad assumptions. There are problems with not thinking these things through. That's my thoughts, yeah?
Yes, but at the same time, nothing can counter, okay? So that's why I say they are the highest authority. Whatever the, farther down the scholars say, it cannot run opposite. So the highest authority, because otherwise you have all kinds of people who say, oh, well, this scholar said this or this scholar said that. Yeah. And that helps to deceive the kafir who thinks, oh, well, Islam could be modernized. Well, Islam cannot be modernized. That's.
There's 2 points. There's a hierarchy of scholars that few people are aware of. There's actually a very specific, very strict hierarchy of scholars. And then also Muslims, regular Muslims, the lay Muslim is part of a strata. There's multiple levels of Islam. There are 2 divisions and there are 4 levels. at a simple, as for, well, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So lay Muslims are at the bottom level
yeah,
of
yeah.
the.
No, I understand
So,
that. Yeah,
and the only document that they're allowed to read without supervision is the Quran, and then they need to go through the hadiths with supervision. The scholars technically don't even read the hadiths, they read the commentaries of the hadiths or the tafsirs of the hadiths. So even Bukhari is interpreted through another scholar. So, even the hadiths are interpreted through a higher level of scholarship. So we need to understand that lay Muslims study the Quran. However, the scholars go to a completely different set of sources that
yeah,
include everything
yeah.
else.
I understand that. And at the beginning of Reliance of the Traveler, of course, it has all the recommendations from Al-Azhar, etc. The problem is that what we end up with then are kafirs who think that somehow it can be changed. Just yesterday, a woman who knows more than average about Islam, all right, sent me a link to a woman, a Muslim, who is saying that Islam needs to be modernized. And she says, I think you might be interested in her. And no, I am not, because these people gain a huge number of followers and they are thoroughly deceived. And they may be doing it in all sincerity, that somehow, because you know what she says? When you read what she says, I believe, men and women are equal, etc. You're not going to find any of that in the doctrine. This is absolutely counter to what Islam teaches. She is not a Muslim, and she is useful now. A whole lot of people will go, hey, you know what? You're wrong, Elaine. You're a hater, because this woman here, she's a Muslim, and she thinks the same thing we do. and she says we can modernize Islam. I got a whole book of people like that. I think there's 8 of them in there talking about, well, they don't like the hadith. Maybe we could take out the hadith. Well, maybe we could take out this. None of that is possible. There is no one to approve anything like that. It can't be done, right? And the highest deed, the best thing you can do in Islam is to be a jihadi anyway.
Yeah.
So, anybody like that, as long as they're useful, fine. But once, it flips like it just did in Syria, now you say something like that, they're in, Assad, whether you liked him or you hated him, he was trying to keep it more secular. And now they're definitely saying, no, it's going to be Sharia. And anybody who counters that is going to have their head cut off.
Yeah. And how do you modernize the example of Muhammad, who
Is dead.
was someone who enjoyed the sexual companionship of very, very young ladies?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, I do try to keep it simple, and I keep it simple for a purpose, is because I'm trying to reach the average human being who has absolutely no knowledge of all this. And when I start, well, I mean, you're generally speaking with experts on things that are a bit different from this, but just, for the average person, if they think that, well, the scholars are going to change this, or it's law like we've got that, you set a precedent and it sort of changes over time. That's not going to happen. It's not like that at all.
Yeah. In fact, no modern scholars have the authority to change what the earlier scholars laid down.
Yeah, yeah,
That is fixed. They can only interpret on the basis of what came before, but they cannot alter it or change any of the fundamentals.
yeah,
Sharia is fixed and eternal forever.
yeah. So anyway, I'll proceed to the next one. We're in agreement. We are in agreement. Okay. So this is the period in which, the Sharia was established, and it began with Muhammad as purely a prophet. Now, he was intolerant. He didn't, he would curse people's ancestors, curse them. He was very intolerant man. And he wanted everyone to follow him. He wanted them to follow Islam. And they didn't want to. They had 360 idols in their Kaaba. It was a very multicultural sort of place. And everybody had their own favorite idol. But he wanted them to follow him. And he had a very powerful wife, Khadija. She proposed to him. At that time, women were actually much better off. The veil wasn't compulsory until 5 years after he had gone to Medina. In fact, you can read hadith from his wife Aisha and say, before we had to wear the veil, I've got several of those. But she was very powerful. She owned the caravans. He ran a few caravans for her and did a good job. So she proposed marriage to him. So she was highly sought after, and she was a protector. his uncle Abu Talib was also a protector. So he had these guys in his corner. But once they died, then he didn't. And in the meantime, he had only acquired less than 150. 150 is the highest possible number of followers that went with him to Medina. And that would be including all the children and the wives and everything else. But he had very few followers. So when he left, decided, look, I need to migrate. I need to get out of Dodge. I don't have any protectors here anymore. And went to Yathrib, it was called then, and the name was changed to Medina. When he migrated there, he changed completely because first he started robbing caravans. He had no means of support. And in fact, in the Hadith...
You're saying he was a sand pirate?
In fact, in the Hadith, there's a Hadith that says that my livelihood is under the shade of the spears. All right? This is how I make my money, okay? It couldn't be any more clear. And he said, I have been made, I've been given 5 things, and I've been made successful through terror is one of them. And when you translate the Arabic, it clearly says terror. But when you read the Hadith at the online search engines, they use the word awe, but it is terror. So he fought with all his neighbors. And people will say, oh, well, it was defensive. No, he was going out and attacking his neighbors. Some left, for instance, the Jews in Medina ended up going to CAIR. Later, he went to CAIR and ransacked CAIR. So the jihad began with the migration to Medina. I'm spending a lot more time on this than I had intended.
Interesting. When I was there, all the Arabs called it Khubr.
Called what, Hubud?
CAIR. When I was there, I've been there a couple of times. They call it Khubr.
Hubud. Okay.
Khubr.
Oh well.
Khubr.
No, I will say at the outset that my pronunciation is not very good, but yeah. I've got Ibn Majah right now. Okay, so he migrated to Medina, and that marks the beginning of the calendar. The calendar doesn't begin with his so-called prophethood, okay? It doesn't begin there. It begins with jihad. Now, this is extremely significant. So that's the beginning of the Islamic calendar. He became a military leader and politician, jihadi. And the first thing he did there was establish a mosque. And that is how Islam ordinarily enters an area. The first thing they do is create a mosque. And he divided the world into the Ummah, who follow Islam, and everybody else. And it remains that way to this day. So if there's for instance, the Quran gets burned in Sweden, then the whole Ummah is upset all the way around the world. So this is a great deal of power to wield. It is an enormous amount of power. And when you think about the Organization of Islamic Cooperation at the UN, it isn't just that they're extremely wealthy. It isn't just that they're the largest voting bloc. It's that they have the influence over the Ummah, and everyone is well aware of that. And even though they don't follow the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, they still vote on resolutions, they propose resolutions, they chair committees, and yet the values are entirely different. So this is how Muhammad began with the Arabian Peninsula, but then successive caliphs carried on the jihad and expanded out as far as Spain.
Shouldn't we be shaming Muslims for this obvious Islamic colonization? Because they don't waste a moment to shame the rest of the world, especially white people, about supposed colonization. But here you've got Muslims that have colonized and made a massive empire. Shouldn't they be shamed the same way?
Well, no, I don't shame people. There's no reason to do that. That won't move the needle. My interest is
in tool. Shame is a major propaganda tool. It is proven extremely effective. It's a consistent part of a propaganda arsenal.
Well, to me, that kind of makes the person doing it look bad. For instance, just yesterday, there was I saw a little comment on LinkedIn. I went to see what it was. And it was a Muslim woman in Canada, and she was calling people, Canadians, colonizers. The woman has a complete lack of self-awareness. What are you? and someone had written that underneath, what are you? Like, to me, nothing is gained there. I could say you should be ashamed of
Yeah, but
yourself,
how
but
many
what
leftists, how many
difference would that make?
liberals have been shamed into licking the literally licking the shoes of black people because white people are bad colonists and then selling out and undermining their own culture?
Well, you have a point there. You have a point there, but it's not something that I would do.
But
I
it's an
would
effective
because everybody's
tool. I
different.
mean,
It's
shame and humiliation is an effective tool, and it is an explicit part of the tactics used by the Muslim Brotherhood to shame.
yes, yes, but then they have the doctrine. They have doctrine behind them that actually encourages that sort of thing right from birth, saying, how terrible all those others are. We don't, so it would never be an effective tool on our side, and it isn't something I would do anyway. I just wouldn't do it.
Yeah, but then we shouldn't. So then we shouldn't speak about Islamic slave ownership, which is the largest, longest run
Absolutely, I
like,
speak about it all the time.
colonization, which is integral with their slavery project. I mean, it's like no, 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 we can't do that because we're nice people. We need to roll over and die for because we're too sweet to say nasty things, nasty words, bad. That's
Oh, there it is. And since we're sidetracking a little bit, I'll bring this up as an example. Okay, this is a baby naming book. All right. So, when you have a baby naming book, you expect it to be about babies and names, right? Well, this one, right at the beginning, it says that a baby should be given a Muslim name. Absolutely. An Islamic name. And why? To distinguish them from other nationalities. Always don't be like those guys. All right. And then it goes on to say that they must have a strong, dignified faith, respectable lifestyle, all the more necessary in the present age where the enemies of Islam, and we're talking about babies here, the enemies of Islam never fail to degrade the Muslims and defame Islam. We should therefore be watchful against the enemies. In a baby naming book, why do we always have to be enemies? They always have to say how terrible the Kafirs are and how they hate them. And it's just so much hate. It's just so sad. I find it sad. So anyway, I'm not into shaming. However, when Muhammad was dying, he gave a couple of orders, and he said to expel the pagans from the Arabian Peninsula, so not a good neighbor, and continue giving gifts to the foreign delegates because, of course, he understood very well the power of influencers. And in fact, he said if only 10 of the Jewish scholars had followed him, they would all have followed him. And we see that to this present day, and it has worked right into the Islamic taxation system that there be a category for sweetening hearts, for bringing people to Islam. That's influencers. 14 centuries of influencers. This was not just invented yesterday. So we'll begin with the 5 pillars of Islam everybody is familiar with, I think. And here we have Ibn Majah. And it says, "Oh, messenger of Allah, tell me of an action that will gain me admittance to paradise and keep me from hell." He said, 1, I've numbered them, worship Allah. So this is the shahada that people are required to say to become a Muslim. That's all they have to do, but that's it. It's the testimony of faith. All right, worship Allah, establish prayer, pay charity, fast Ramadan, and perform Hajj. Those are the ones people are familiar with. But then he goes on to say, shall I not tell you the head of the matter, its pillar and pinnacle? It is jihad. Shall I not tell you the basis of that? He took hold of his tongue and said, restrain this. So people don't talk about that, but it is incredibly important. And it's just not spoken about. It's there, but it's not mentioned. That is very significant. And we'll get to that at the end of
the
this.
first lie would be that there are not 5 pillars of Islam, there are 6.
You betcha. There certainly are. So, and they, some people call it, they say, the 6th pillar of Islam. I have heard that said, is very much there. So how does that tie into the workplace today? Well, from the Quran, it says that he has sent Muhammad with guidance to manifest it over all religion, although others dislike it. And that is why we find in the workplace that Islam is being introduced over others who don't like it because it is very, very different. And in different places, in different hadith, Muhammad actually said, don't be like them. If they do it, do the opposite. So even dyeing your hair, the non-Muslims don't dye their hair, so you should dye your hair. If you've got a situation where people are deliberately, not the people, but it was set up that way, where the doctrine deliberately is set up so that you will do the opposite of everybody else, it's going to cause a problem. And it does. So in 2009, the New York Times reported that although Muslims accounted for only 2% of America's workforce, they filed nearly a quarter of religious discrimination claims. That is incorrect because it was actually about 1% of America's workforce at that time. And now it is 1.1% of America's workforce. And in 2015, they were accounting for 40% of those complaints. So it's gone up dramatically. Well, how did that happen? Well, here we have Islamic organizations. Now, these are activist organizations. They are often given grants by Western governments. And a very big one is CAIR. It's the Council of American Islamic Relations. So CAIR was established in 1994, I believe, and prosecuted their first case in 1995. So they had started out just taking sort of an educational approach. And in 1999, so only 5 years later, they're saying other venues such as litigation, legislation, and political mobilization could add more teeth. So how do they go about that? Many different ways. So we have all of these booklets that are published and things that are given to schools and things that are given to politicians. There's publishing going on all the time to explain about what Islamic rights are, all right? And an employer is told, these are our rights. It's a religious obligation. You need to cooperate. And they give guides to employers, to hospitals, to schools. Know your rights as a student while you're traveling, as an employee, while you're protesting with law enforcement. Now, 7 years ago, they got very clever and introduced an app. Now, pretty much everybody's got a cell phone. And if you're a Muslim, good chance you're going to have this app on your phone, and you can report directly to CAIR. And if you have a complaint, they will carry it right up to the Supreme Court for you. Now, this is totally unfair because their colleagues at work, co-workers, their employers, they don't have an organization they can call who is going to act on their behalf. It costs thousands and thousands of dollars for employers to defend their workplace, whereas an employee can complain and CAIR will cover all of the expenses. So they've been a tax-exempt charitable organization since 1994. And if you want to make a complaint, report an incident, it is really easy to do. So I went in to report a complaint. Of course, I didn't make a complaint, but I just gave it a try. I can't tell you how easy this is to do. And you can select here. Would you like to report a violation of your rights, bias in the news media, bias in a publication? They'll go for all of it. And you can report for anywhere. Now, like I said, this man I was talking to is in France. So it's been a huge problem in Europe with employers being taken to court all of the time. And CAIR is the one that's actually doing it.
Let me just add something about CAIR if I can. So have a look here. CAIR published this leaflet, Build a Wall of Resistance. Don't talk to the FBI. So CAIR was telling people, don't rat on other Muslims. So they're telling people, do not cooperate with law enforcement. So they're building, shall we say, a little bit of insulation from reporting crimes. I wonder why that would be. Would they be aiding and abetting terror movements, crimes, criminals? Maybe, maybe not.
Well, that incident in New Orleans at Christmas, where the man drove through the Christmas celebration, the man's mosque was actually in Texas, and they told their congregation that if they are contacted by the FBI, that they should not respond, that they should refer them to CAIR.
Yep. And this is also explicit in the Sharia that the Muslim is the friend to the other Muslim. The Muslim is the
Yeah.
brother to his fellow Muslim. And for a Muslim to reveal an act, for a Muslim to reveal a crime or a heinous act is itself a heinous act. It is more egregious for a Muslim to reveal what another Muslim has done than the actual thing that that Muslim did. So this is actually explicitly in the Sharia. That's part of the doctrines of lying, where they're not to reveal what other Muslims have done. They have to hide those facts. So they're following the Sharia, whether people know it or not. This is explicitly what they're doing. These rules are in the Sharia.
Yeah, and by the way, I couldn't see that booklet, whatever you were showing. All I can see is my screen here. It's reassuring to hear your voice. I know
You'd have to
somebody's there.
change you'd have to swap to the next screen for you to see, but this is an anti-FBI poster published by CAIR. You'd have to just change your current screen. You'd have to
Yeah, I wish I knew what I needed to do.
Alt tab between screens.
Oh,
Alt and tab between screens.
there you are, like that. Okay. All right. Okay. No,
Yeah,
it would be
no.
nice if it was like that all the time. This is so weird, this thing here.
Yeah,
But
sorry.
anyway,
Yeah, so
okay.
let's go back. Let me unshare my screen, and we're back to you again. So go back to your presentation. There.
All right, there we are. So we have the this is what you're told. So we're in the app now. We've gone into the app, but we're going to make a complaint, and there are recommendations. They tell you to remain calm, inform the offending party. So maybe tell your boss that you believe their actions are discriminatory, and you report this to them in writing. And then you start saving memos, you keep a journal, you note witnesses, written complaints, create a paper trail. Contact our attorneys at the first sight of a problem. Do not sign any documents or resign. Don't ask to be transferred. Don't request mediation, and make sure to file an incident report on our website. So this is CAIR Ohio, and they say they have resolved hundreds of employment discriminations over the years. This is just Ohio. And it continues to go up. CAIR says it received more than 8,000 complaints in, I think it was 2023. And yeah, 8,061 complaints. And they call it hate. Like, why always calling things hate and setting people against each other?
Because any effort by non-Muslims to reject the encroachment of Islam is completely hateful. And a lot of these are just lawfare designed to gum up the system, just designed to overwhelm the system so it cannot cope. So these have no necessary standing, but they're there simply to make people's hands full so that you're unable to respond. And we need to find ways to do it. CAIR should just be shut down. They should simply be declared what they are.
Well, they are in I think it's the UAE, but I'll get to that. But yeah, so they call it hate, and of course that sets people against each other, and the number just continues to go up. And there it is. So yeah, it's the United Arab Emirates have declared them a terrorist organization. And recently, a former employee has said they are receiving foreign funding. And so now they've been told that they need to open their books. Now, CAIR is the largest Muslim civil rights group in the US. It has about 33 chapters. And as I mentioned before, it collects, it's tax deductible, but it collects something called zakat. Now, zakat is the Islamic tax that's one of the pillars that all Muslims are required to pay. It's 2.5%. I'll get to that in a minute. But in 2024, CAIR California reported over 17 million in revenue. And, I'm just going to mention something because, I'm on LinkedIn and I'm connected with, Muslims around the world, women, and very few of them, I'm very careful. But some of them are in very dire situations, like in Afghanistan, just terrible. And these organizations do nothing to help them. I've actually tried to help some of these women, given them lists of organizations that they can write to try and get some help. They don't help them. They don't even answer them. All of their websites are about Islamophobia. They're supposed to care about other Muslims. I don't believe they do. They just want to, anyway, carry on with, it doesn't appear that from their website. It's just appalling to me that they say nothing for these poor people who are suffering. So anyway, that's a sidetrack.
I can just add something to this briefly and just go to that screen. I mean, if you look, similar groups are also active. Similar groups are also active across the rest of the world. I mean, look at the UK. I mean, after Muslims are doing things that are upsetting the local population, the government assigns millions to protect UK mosques and Muslim schools from hate attacks, which is fascinating. Churches are being burned, Jews are being attacked, and the mosques are getting the protection. Government commits more funding to protect UK Muslims when it's actually the non-Muslims being killed, raped, and other crimes against them. And then we have things like the Civil Service Muslim Network,
Yeah,
which
they're terrible.
benefits Muslims in government. Let's get more Muslims into government and let's supplant the locals.
Yeah.
How the Home Office Network, Islamic Network, aims to recruit Muslim staff and influence policymakers. I wonder what kind of policies they're trying to implement. Maybe a bias towards Islam. So yeah, the threat of Islamic fundamentalism in governance. Yeah, so this is happening everywhere. This is not isolated to one location. It's global. And I'm sure if you do, CAIR will be behind all of this as well.
And it's like I was mentioning to you this morning. It's like when you try to get out information in a non-Islamic country, and you're trying to put out factual information, like I do. I write about the doctrine, and it's always factual. There's tons of evidence. My last report has 24 references, and it has at least 30 different references from the text, plus the 24 sources that aren't in the text about news and books and other things, right? Like, so well referenced. And in the first hour, it had 584 impressions, which meant it was moving like greased lightning. But within a couple of hours, all of a sudden it stopped. And why would it stop? It would be because either somebody working there went, hold it, she's talking about Islam, or somebody reported it. Now, of course, the paper is 100% bona fide. There is nothing hateful. I never write anything hateful. I simply write factual, what the doctrine says.
But
That's
anything
all.
that inhibits the spread of Islam is by default hateful in Islam.
Yeah, they don't want anybody educated about it. And I mean, that's clear. A kafir isn't even supposed to touch a Quran. But my video is very blurry here, so I'm just wondering if there's some way to sort of fix that a bit. I can't. No, I better not.
You would have to go to your video, and in the drop down, just click the little arrow with your video. You'll see stop video. Don't click that. There's a little upwards arrow just right next to where your video icon is. Click on that, and you will see resolution. It'll show your camera and the resolution of your camera below that. You'll see your camera, your video input, and your resolution.
Yeah. I don't
increase
think...
the resolution.
Oh. No, it's... Oh, maybe... Will that make any difference?
Let's have a look. Yes, now your resolution. It says resolution.
Yeah, I did. No, I did that already.
Increase it to the maximum.
I don't think that's it. My camera goes out of focus sometimes.
Go to the maximum. Yes.
Boy, is this weird. My camera isn't even on.
And now you can just click off anywhere to set that. You've now got the camera set.
Anyway, blurry or not, I'm just going to... Can you even see me? I'm frozen now, aren't I?
Yeah, it should take a moment to reset, but yes.
Nope.
So stop your camera, stop your video, and restart your video. Just click the camera icon, just stop it, and restart it. Stop video. No, not the little arrow. Click the main icon and restart it.
No.
Also, it says allow Talk Studio to see your screen. Just cancel that. Yeah, go to 1080p again. Yeah, just choose a high resolution. Yeah,
Okay.
it's fine.
Yeah, well, when I go to the higher resolution
Okay,
now,
so
I'm
720 then, yeah.
frozen.
So might be a problem with your drivers.
I think I better go back to the lower resolution, honestly.
Okay. Sorry
Well,
about that.
yeah, that's very strange. All right, look, we're just going to go back to my other screen.
Okay.
How's that? Can you see the screen now?
Let me put the screen back. Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not sure what happened with you. You're still frozen.
Oh dear. All right.
And you can always go out of the studio, come back into the studio.
Okay, why don't we do that? So,
So say not now there, just not now on that. Yeah. Close that again. Yeah. Excellent.
leave and come back.
Yeah. Yeah. Try that. Okay. Let's just give her a moment to come back. No, Allah works in mysterious ways, as you can tell. So, yeah, we have some serious issues with Islamic infiltration into governments. This is very likely happening in your local government too, and it's something to deal with. Yeah, I'm running at 1080p, and that works well for me. I can run at 4K, but there's no need for that. Okay, let's wait for Elaine to come back. Hopefully that fixes her camera. And welcome back.
Hello. All right. So I can go back to share. Let's try this. Maybe. Okay. So
Okay,
I should
your
be able to just
presentation.
go back to the presentation.
And there
Is
we are.
that all right? We're good. Station identification. Okay. So where were we? So I was talking about CAIR, and there's a CAT eligible. So they collect this 2.5%, and it's a pillar of Islam. So they collect it off every Muslim. And they're collecting an enormous amount of money. And in their annual report here from 2023, they give different examples of cases that they have prosecuted. And this was a woman who was asked to remove her hijab at a jail. Now, this jail in 2 years had asked 2 different women to remove their hijab. That's all they did wrong. Okay. However, they were prosecuted, and the settlement included a financial compensation of $90,000. And they established new policy. So in the future, if somebody shows up in a burqa, I don't know, maybe they'll have a woman meet with her. I have no idea, of course, what their policy is, but $90,000 for that. And that's taxpayer money. So here we'll have a brief look at zakat. Zakat is 2.5% that every Muslim is supposed to pay if they can on wealth generating assets. So for instance, if you have a rental, it would be on the rent collected, not on the house itself. So cash and savings, gold and silver, investments, business assets, agricultural produce and livestock, for example. But if there is a mall, and a mall might be actually dedicated as a waqf, people are being encouraged to donate to waqfs with their zakat now. And that is considered something that has basically changed sovereignty. It is now dedicated to Allah for all time. For example, they are saying that Israel is a waqf, that it has been dedicated for all time to Allah. But another example is in India. A town found that their entire village and their temple was considered part of Waqf territory that should belong to Muslims. This used to be done with cemeteries and such things, but now it's actually being done with schools, Islamic centers, things that are more temporary in nature, but they're generating income, and the income is for Allah to be used for the purpose of Islam. So this zakat, 2.5%, is very, very effective. It is a lot of money. And when a mall becomes Islamic, now it's not going to have alcohol. It's going to have a Sharia board. It's going to follow Sharia principles. It won't have any pork, etc. And the whole time it is generating money, zakat, for Islam. So we need to know how that money is used. And just to make it kind of interesting, like when you look at your 2020 tax statement, you're spending so much for the fire department and so much for, the school, etc. It has categories. Well, so does zakat. Zakat has 8 different categories. And the 2 that are significant are bringing hearts together. This is the equivalent. You see, the thing is that this has been going since the 7th century. And it is still going today. It is extremely effective, and it is a parallel economic system. So it functions very well all on its own. So we have money for the poor here. This is like social services and the needy, emergency relief. For those who are employed to collect zakat, this is like paying public service. Ministry of propaganda for freeing slaves or captives, military, financial services for those in debt, for the cause of Allah, military. This includes activist groups. And this is the cause of Allah, fi sabilillah, jihad, the stranded traveler, foreign affairs. So it says, and this is from Reliance of the Traveler, the classic manual of Islamic law, zakat is obligatory for every free Muslim, and it must be distributed amongst the 8 categories, 1/8 to each category. And you can pick up a 2020 accounting manual, Islamic accounting manual, and it will say that a certain portion of the zakat is for the cause of Allah, and it's done to the present day. And this 7th category is for those fighting for Allah. Now, how many religions finance military? So you see how much this is political. This is
Yeah.
so political.
Yeah, let me show this in the Sharia itself. So if you go in the Reliance, it's book H, Zakat. And then if you go further, you can see there's a lot of information here on Zakat in the index. It's a very long index. And then when you continue, when you go down here, you'll see here the 8 categories of recipients and then those fighting for Allah. So those fighting in jihad.
Yeah,
And of
that's it
course,
exactly.
it is not lawful to give zakat to non-Muslims.
No.
So this is charity from which you are not allowed to benefit because you're not a Muslim. So die in a ditch, pretty much.
Yep. Yep. Should I go back?
Yeah.
All right. So that's the money. And here's an example of what I was saying about activist organizations being financed under the category of fi sabilillah. Now, this is the National Canadian Council of Muslims.
Fi sabilillah. Fi sabilillah.
Fi sabilillah.
Yeah, because jihad in the way of Allah, jihad in the path.
Yeah, no, I understand that's what it is. My
Sabilillah.
pronunciation, as I said, sabilillah. All right. So this is from the Canadian Council of Imams, and they have authorized the National Canadian Council of Muslims to collect zakat under that category. Now, the National Canadian Council of Muslims used to be called CAIR Canada, and they changed their name in 2013, but they are very much affiliated with this organization in the US. You'll see that in a moment. And the imams compliment them, and they say that they provide legal services, and that they are also very successful in presenting the Muslim viewpoint in media by writing to the editor or by paid articles. They also start letter writing campaigns to politicians. And they're very active. So here's the growth of organizations in Germany, just to show you how many such organizations they are. And they're extremely organized, and they all follow the same, Sharia. They all follow the same thing. They all teach the same thing. So here we have the National Canadian Council of Muslims, CAIR Canada, saying they offer legal services and that Muslims must know their rights and responsibilities. and that they frequently collaborate with civil liberties associations, that they finance lawyers, and they've appeared in multiple court cases, such as human rights tribunals and the Supreme Court of Canada. And they also have booklets, lots of them. So now we'll get to the workplace. So there's 10 categories of workplace challenges that have been identified, and in every case, I provide the doctrine and examples. So the survey data showed that 70% of managers were encountering religiosity by 2019. And here's the organization that I was in touch with, and they're called Firm Europe, and they try to help employers who are faced with these challenges. And they've done a number of surveys. I'll refer to quite a few as we go through. The results are the employers feel they should not have to provide a prayer room, special leave, or adapt their schedules to Islamic prayer time. That employees should not be able to refuse a task forbidden by Sharia, such as refusing contact with coworkers and business partners. And that employers believe that Sharia is a potential security risk, and that employees should leave their religion at home when they come to work, which is what it used to be like. Okay, I remember when I was, in the workforce, many years ago, that, people didn't bring their religion to work. This is a new phenomenon. Employers don't know how to handle it. For one thing, they don't know what Sharia says. So if they're being fed a line, they don't know it. And here are the 10 areas. Okay, 50% had to handle Islam-related issues on an occasional or regular basis. And sometimes there was interference by external religious representatives. Now, this book by Leslie James Shaw is in French, à la boulot, but they gave me a copy in English. And here are the 10 categories that were identified, and we'll go through them one at a time. We've got prayer, Ramadan, dress and appearance, halal, gender segregation, pork and alcohol, body rituals, physical contact, proselytizing, and jihad. So for prayer, the survey results, and there are different surveys, they're not all by firm or whatever, there are a lot of different surveys. 29% of managers face prayer-related demands, such as prayer rooms. 70% reported praying on the job. 32% had demands for scheduling accommodation and absences for religious reasons. 26% faced demands for dedicated prayer rooms. And what does the doctrine say? Well, the Quran, we'll start with the Quran. It says the middle prayer, the evening prayer, the morning prayer, late afternoon, when the day begins to decline, the two ends of the day, approach of the night, decline of the sun, darkness of night, rising of sun. So it's pretty general there. So what did they do before there were clocks? I mean, clocks have only been around for a few hundred years. Well, they would do it by the sun. So one prayer was before sunrise, one shortly after noon, another in the late afternoon, just after the sun goes down before retiring to the night. But now we have printed daily prayer schedules right to the second. You have to run and pray right now. And there are also apps. So missing apps is considered a serious lapse. They are supposed to pray, but they have been able in the past to make up their prayer as soon as possible or recite it even the next day. Now, what we looked at was the Quran. So from the Hadith, you will find that Muhammad said, and he's the top dog here, he said that if you miss a prayer, you pray it when you remember. And when they were sitting with Muhammad, he said, if you can avoid missing a prayer through sleep or business, you must do so. And his wife said that sometimes he missed a night prayer and he would observe extra rakas the next day. Well, how are they able to do that? Because of the principle of darura. Now, this has always existed, of course, because people cannot do things perfectly. So this is the Quran 16:115. Necessity overcomes obligation and makes the forbidden permissible. If you can't do your prayer right now, you can do it later. If you have only got, non-halal food, that's fine. So the principle of darura is frequently practiced in non-Islamic countries. And imagine, I mean, Muslims have been in Canada, for example, for decades. And it's only recently that there's all this pressure because Islam is now gaining strength and it's getting political influence. As it does, more and more Sharia is introduced. But they've been here for decades, and this hasn't been necessary. So if halal foods, Islamic schools, finance, insurance, mortgages are not available, they are free to choose non-Sharia alternatives and cannot be pressured to accept only Islamic alternatives. Well, what has changed? Governments, whether they are buying votes or trying to be, woke or whatever they're trying to be, are accommodating demands. So there's this political thing happening. And every time a Western government accommodates a demand for Sharia, now this freedom is actually taken away from a Muslim. You are limiting their choices, not increasing them. Because now that there is an Islamic alternative, the Ummah will pressure them to take it. So you may have been perfectly happy with your student loan. But now that the government has said, okay, we have Islamic finance, now you're going to have to take that option, even though it may not benefit you, because the Ummah will want you to take the Islamic option. So our own governments are facilitating this, and they're facilitating it because they're dealing with it solely as a religion and saying, okay, you have to have it because we're religion. But Islam is not just a religion. It is extremely political.
I mean, they're preparing Muslims for more serious adherence to the Sharia once there's a full caliphate, because they have to incrementally ratchet their way towards full implementation of the Sharia.
Yeah.
For instance, ISIS, if an ISIS adherent in their territories who belonged with them failed to attend one of the daily prayers, they would kill them. They would cut off their heads. There were baskets, huge baskets of these heads. And they would show them to people as warning for missing.
Exactly. Terror.
So, for instance, if you look here in the Sharia, well, thank you very much, Shaitan. The second Shaitan, thank you very much. How do secular Muslims feel that Sharia law exists? It's very hard to tell the difference between those who are ignorant versus those who are dishonest.
Yeah.
At some level, Muslims are aware of it. I mean, they realize, if not in detail, but they recognize in principle what is in it and what it says, because they've been indoctrinated in it from an early age, 4 or 5 years old. So they have an idea that it's not good for you.
Baby names. There's something wrong.
Sorry, please.
Yeah, they know there is something wrong. But for example, there were a couple of women who came out to where I live, and they were talking about a display at the university about headgear. And of course, they got on about hijabs, and I questioned them. And I said, well, why, when you speak about, because they spoke about Quebec and saying, oh, Quebec is terrible, it doesn't want women to wear hijabs. But when you speak about Iran, you say, well, it's politics. And you say it's religion when you want to wear one, but it's politics when Iran does it. So many Muslims have the idea that all of this stuff that is happening in Afghanistan and Iran and Syria, all of this stuff has nothing to do with Islam. That's politics. That's a bad government. It's nothing to do with our religion. That is what they are told.
Yeah, it's culture. But as we know, Islam has nothing to do with Islam. I think it's come to that point now. Yeah, but let me show from the Sharia. It states here, under strict Sharia in a caliphate, a Muslim who believes that the prayer is obligatory, but through lack of concern neglects to perform it, has not committed unbelief.
Exactly.
Which is great. Rather, he is executed, he's washed, he's prayed over, and buried in the Muslim's cemetery. So that's what ISIS did. You miss a prayer, you belong to ISIS, they kill you by chopping off your head. There's no discussion. You are dead. And as I said, there are baskets of these. Now, notice that you are washed. When a Muslim body is washed, that is not a sign of respect. That is a sign of disrespect. Because, for instance, there was a time when people had committed jihad under the Bush administration. There was some, or the Obama, whatever. These guys had done a terrorist act. And so the Muslims took their bodies covered in blood and buried them. And they said that this was... they weren't washed because this is a sign of their low status. The fact is that when you appear before Allah and you are bloodied and wounded from whatever you did in jihad, Allah gives you greater respect because that is evidence of the fact that you weren't munching Doritos on the sofa.
Yeah.
So the fact that these people are washed means that they go before Allah and Allah says, you bunch of weaklings, nobodies. You guys clearly didn't come to me covered in blood. You can't be very helpful Muslims. You one of the weak Muslims, aren't you? Go sit over there in the kiddies' corner, face the wall, wear the dunce cap. That's pretty much where it is. But notice, this is what the Sharia will bring. And then on a point that you raised, there are six principles or six pillars of the Sharia. And to enforce the Sharia, all is permitted. So, for instance, one of the principles of the Sharia is the first one is aims are more important than the means. So, al-maqasid aqad min al-wasa'il, right? So, in other words, how you achieve something is not important. It's that it gets done.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and notice here this fourth principle: necessities permit the forbidden. Al-darurat tubikh al-makhsurat. So this is one of the major principles. These are two of the major principles that underline and are the foundation of the Sharia. You can do the forbidden if you feel there's a reason. That's an object. That's not an objective. That's a subjective calculation that you make. If you feel it's a good idea because it will take forward the cause of Islam, then do it. And how you do it? Well, if you need to murder people, well, you don't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs, now can you?
Yep. I get it. I do get to that bit.
How that is. And that is part of this is how the Sharia sees itself. So I'll go back to your presentation. I'll just hide mine.
All right, over we go there. So so I was just going to mention exactly what we were just talking about, and that is deceit. Okay, so the scholars say there's no harm in giving a misleading impression if it is required by an interest in countenance by sacred law, and that outright lying is permissible, and that deception is better, but it is permissible to lie when the goal is obligatory or permissible, and it is obligatory if the goal is obligatory. So definitely world dominion is a goal.
Mm-hmm.
And now there was something I was going to mention earlier, and we were speaking about war. Well, we have spoken about war. Oh dear, I've done something weird again there. But in the tafsir of Ibn Kathir, so we're talking about a secondary source here, sort of commentary. It's a commentary on the Quran. It tells you what to make war against Islam is, all right? And that is simply to oppose it, all right? So when it says, oh, well, they're at war with us, all you have to do is oppose having Islam forced on you. That's enough, okay?
Yeah.
So we'll go back to this. So prayer, to continue with prayer, there was a case study, and that was Somali employees demanding multiple prayer breaks during work hours. So that's what I mean. How does the employer know? Are they supposed to have 2 or 3? They take their word for it. And the outcome was they were receiving $1 million in lost productivity. And there were protests. So finally, 21 employees were terminated and the lawsuits were dismissed, thank goodness. But here's an example from the Geneva airport. All of a sudden, you have 30 Muslims decide to pray loudly, and people are frightened by this. This is an act of intimidation because the staff did not dare to intervene for fear of provoking a violent incident and being accused of Islamophobia. So they found prayer totally disrupts the workplace efficiency and team dynamics. Now, there are other ways that prayer can be intrusive. This is Dearborn in Michigan, United States, which has completely transformed itself in the last 20 years. And we have the prayers broadcast on loudspeakers, Arabic everywhere. And in Israel, they were allowing the call to prayer in a few cities, but they have stopped that now. So it's been in the London Mosque, the East London Mosque, since the 1980s. But there was a fellow who had escaped persecution in Pakistan. And when they went to introduce it in Newham, he's an ex-Muslim. He's one of those ones who wanted to get away from Sharia, He says the adhan had been used to intimidate the non-believers while simultaneously pressuring Muslims to drop all they were doing to go and pray. It's very totalitarian. So when our authorities continually accommodate such demands, they are making our countries more and more like the countries that some people were trying to escape. So Ramadan, they found 42% of employers were willing to implement flex time back in 1997. This was a survey that CAIR did itself. And the doctrine, the Quran says the month of Ramadan is special. And the Hadith say whoever observes fast, then past sins will be forgiven. So yes, they're supposed to do Ramadan. But what employers have found is that this reduces productivity, especially in physically demanding roles, such as operating equipment or vehicles, and is actually dangerous. That it was working with people rather like they were hungover, as if they'd been out drinking the night before, because they'll be up very late eating when they get home, which is a very strange kind of a fast, really. It's just you're eating at a different time of day more than anything else. So Renault in France, the car company, found that fasting workers had faced health risks. It slowed production. It increased the workload on non-Muslims. It strained workplace relationships. And it does a lot more than that because, for example, in Nice, France, a young Muslim waitress was beaten up at a bar because she served alcohol on the first day of Ramadan. She is in France. Why should this be happening in a non-Islamic country? And of course, CAIR will prosecute on behalf of people who are seeking Ramadan accommodation and end up getting terminated. So in a school last year in Frankfurt, this school, there were 3 Muslim children in the class, but the teacher, thinking that she's being, very socially progressive, said that the whole entire class could not drink because 3 of them couldn't drink. So the whole class was told that they were not allowed to drink. And what the Sharia says in the manual, classic manual of law, it says a child of 7 is ordered to fast and at 10 is beaten for not fasting. It says the same about prayer. A child of 7 is ordered to pray and at 10 is beaten for not praying. But look how this affects others. This is in Bangladesh, and this Hindu owner of a restaurant was beaten to death for keeping his restaurant open during Ramadan. Like, because they're not praying, nobody else, or not eating, nobody else is allowed to eat either. This is horrible. So dress and appearance, 75% of Belgian employees oppose the religious garments at work. They prefer to keep a secular workplace, just keep religion away from work. And what the doctrine actually says, it doesn't say that they have to wear a hijab. It says they should draw their veils over their chests and bring down over themselves their outer garments. Now, there is a hadith that said, with Muhammad saying that she should not show anything except her face and hands.
Pause
and some carry.
Just pause a second there. This is from MD Suhail Ahmed. Yes, Bible teaches modesty. So does the Torah and Tanakh, and so on. And I'm not sure if this person is Muslim or not. I can only assume they are given their name, but Muslims typically misrepresent the Bible. So they go back to Mosaic law from 5,000 years ago. And then they say, well, why aren't you doing that? Well, first of all, we can't do that because the Bible's corrupted. So therefore, we're not able to do that because we know it actually says to wear jeans and G-strings. But unfortunately, it was corrupted and it said to wear this kind of clothing. So there's no way we can follow that because any Muslim will tell you with great authority the Bible was corrupted. So I don't know why you want to follow a corrupt book. 2, that's Mosaic law. It's 5,000 years later. We kind of follow a set of different laws. And 3, only Muslims will murder you for not covering your hair.
Exactly. So, and of course, in some places it's carried further. And Muslims here will say, oh, well, that has absolutely nothing to do with Islam, right? Or the girls can't go to school. It has nothing to do with Islam. It certainly does. But you have to look a little further. You have to be familiar with the doctrine to understand how they are using it. For example, there is in the Quran, there's a verse that says, there needs to be a screen between the women, that would be Muhammad's wives, They should be behind a screen when you come to speak to them, right? And they were supposed to serve as the example for all other women. So if you want to take it like Afghanistan is, that there should be a screen now between women and everything else. They don't even have windows anymore. They're not allowed windows in their house. That's the screen. This is how it can be interpreted.
Yeah, Muslim women in Afghanistan must not be heard talking. They
Yeah,
must not be heard whatsoever.
yeah,
And
yeah.
this is supposedly somehow modest. And of course, women are blamed for being raped. Women have to cover up from head to toe like a garbage bag because it's not that men do things. No, no, no. Women cause it. It's the fault of the women. They blame the victims. Islam is backwards and upside down.
It
And
is totally. Everything is upside down. So for dress and appearance, to carry on, again, we have another booking photo at a jail. And this woman was asked to take her hijab off for a booking photo. And of course,
just
that was
pause a
prosecuted.
second again. He says that's not law, it's advisory. Let me tell you. So how, in my experience, working with Muslims, first of all, it is obligatory for Muslims to lie. It is not a good idea. It's not a
At times it is, yes.
It is
Yeah,
obligatory for
yeah.
Muslims to lie. So we can, with great faith, assume 100% that Muslims are lying to us. One, out of a lack of clarity and some degree of ignorance, or B, simply just basic dishonesty. And I'm not going to trust some rando Muslim in the chat. We can read this in the Sharia. We can read it from the greatest Islamic scholars to ever live, the Mujtahids Mutlaq. We can read what is written. We can see the examples on the news. Actions speak louder than words, and they tell fewer lies. And we know that we see the examples. Take Salwan Momika. He was murdered because that is what the Sharia demands. Murder for someone who insults Islam. And that's a very broad definition there, or insults Muhammad, but that's a very broad definition. Salwan Momika was murdered explicitly because of the Sharia, regardless of what gaslighting we hear. So these are laws. These are what will become ultimately the final law unless we stop this now, because we see this encroachment. Islam is evil. Islam must be destroyed.
Well,
So
one thing, one thing that really concerns me is that the doctrine absolutely demands that Muslims cover for each other,
yeah,
and they will be rewarded with, paradise. They will be rewarded in heaven. It's not heaven, but anyway, they'll be rewarded in the afterlife, in the hereafter.
the
If
brothel
they,
where they can go and have
yeah,
sex with women
yeah,
daily.
yeah, yeah.
The
If they
brothel in
cover
the
for other
sky.
Muslims, like, it is totally haram to betray another Muslim. So when criminals, what we consider a criminal, are hiding out, nobody is ever going to report them. They can't testify against them. The Bible or whatever they're required to swear on is meaningless, because Quran 9:1 says that any oaths that with the unbelievers are void. They don't matter. So we're not protected in any way from this deceit that is demanded
Yeah.
from Muslims.
Final point on this person. Thanks for your patience here. Hold on, sorry, my bad. I've got the wrong quote here. Now, Suhail, where was his quote? Sorry, I took his quote out. I removed his quote. Suhail, you are changing the subject now because we know that this is the game you play. Every time you mention a lie, we're going to show you the evidence that you're wrong, that you're lying. You will never admit to being wrong. You will never admit to lying. You will then just change the subject and move to the next topic. And this is what you do. This is how you play the game. This is how you derail the conversation. Now, I've just put you on timeout for 30 minutes. I expected you are going to, either you bring evidence rather than this sophistry, or you just shut up, sit down, and be quiet, right? Because really, that's the best you can do here. I'm bringing evidence. My guest, Elaine, is bringing evidence. We can go to the Sharia, and we've just shown what the Sharia is with proof. So just kindly accept the lesson that you've been given, and I've timed you out. And next time, bring us evidence, show us the Sharia, or stop wasting my time and our guests' time and the audience's time. Back to you, Elaine. Thanks.
Sure. I didn't see what his comment was, so I don't know what he's taking exception to.
He was talking about religious stress. I mean, they always talk about women should cover their hair and so on, and
Uh,
that's a very specific thing that's specific to nuns or to women in church and so on. But it's not a global endorsement of all women have to dress like Muslims, wearing bin bags and look like a postbox.
yeah.
This is, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
Islam is just filthy. I mean, the Sharia is filthy. Prove me wrong. And so, hell, if you think, tell you what, I've invited hundreds of Muslims, and somehow they always kind of are afraid to. They run away. They don't want to have this little discussion. But if you think Sharia is better than any Western law, then go through the Sharia, line by line, book by book, law by law, and you prove to me how we're wrong about jihad. How there's no evidence whatsoever in the Sharia of the permissibility to marry and have conjugal relations with infants, girls of 3 months old, 6 months old, 5 years old. And
There's nothing stopping it. Yeah.
yeah,
And
thank you very much.
I have, well, there was a video. I used it as a reference in one of my papers, and it was, I rather hesitate to speak about it. Some people, and they were imams, had gone to this house, and the most senior of the imams, all right, he was thawing a 2-year-old in the night, and she could be heard screaming and screaming and screaming. Anyway, the next day, one of the other imams said, I heard you. I heard last night this child, and I'm wondering about it. And so this senior imam explained to his junior that was quite all right. And the junior, having heard this child screaming all night, just accepted what he said and said, well, you know best. That's all there is to it. You know best. And I find that appalling.
It is horrific. It is horrific. And sadly, it's legal in Islam. It's permitted.
Yeah.
It's
I can
perfectly
share it
normal
with
behavior.
you. I can share it with you sometime. So
Yeah.
it's just incredible. So then I went looking for Khomeini's writings, and yeah, there was nothing in there because he was an imam, he was the spiritual leader of Iran. His writings are horrific, absolutely horrific.
Yeah.
So
I just want to
anyway,
acknowledge a donation from the second Shaitan, and he says, as secular Muslims, we are tired today of what is happening because of Islam itself. We have been cowards for so long that we had no courage to speak up.
that's the
And
problem.
we have to speak up. But I also must warn you that there are no such thing as secular Muslims. There are apostates and there are Muslims.
Yeah,
So, by definition, in the Sharia, you are an apostate and you deserve to be killed. So, you might be, only in Christianity is there the concept of, shall we say, a cultural Christian. But in
I
Islam, sure, you could be a cultural Arab,
yeah.
but you are required to be killed. So, apostasy from Islam, whoever voluntarily leaves Islam is murdered, right?
I thank you for that comment, and that's so true. We need protests in the street about what is happening to the women in Afghanistan. My goodness. Or when you see that, like this man and child that were just killed in Germany, like it, protest against this happening. It would be wonderful, but we don't see that happening. And I understand that, it's a big thing to leave Islam because your whole family is going to hate you. Hopefully you won't get killed if you're in a Western country, but I understand it's not easy. So
Yeah.
I should go back to my
And
presentation.
just to be sure, in a moment, when a person who has reached puberty and is sane voluntarily apostatizes from Islam, he deserves to be murdered. And it says here
Yeah.
that there is no indemnity or no punishment for killing an apostate, since it is killing someone who deserves to die.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is what Islam teaches.
Yeah.
This is what is going to happen. And slowly but surely, this will be the case under a full caliphate. There will be more
And
murders to bring purity.
yeah. And the thing is that when people look at Islamic countries, they can see this happening, and somehow they're living in the West and they don't believe it's real, and it is real. You know, I've seen, you know, women in the street, women who have a hijab on, okay, but they maybe don't have a mahram with them. They're on their own, and a gang of men will form around them, and the ones in the middle of the circle will rape them, and then the ones around that form a defense to keep people away who would try to stop it. Like, and this happens right in the public street. You know, I've seen this happening, and it's, she didn't have a mahram with her, a male protector, or you know, it's just, it is incredible. And yes, this is Islam. Okay, so back to dress and appearance, garments at work. So we spoke about that. We had moved on to this one. So here's an example from Toronto, Canada. Some Muslim women, they're working at a courier company, trucks, loading freight, okay? Ankle-length skirts, hijabs, neck scarves. I mean, this is incredibly risky because they have these conveyor belts and things. You cannot have these kind of loose clothing. They had to climb 6-meter ladders, navigate open metal staircases, and place boxes on a conveyor belt. Yes, they filed a complaint because the boss didn't want them wearing all this. Well, of course, he doesn't want someone to end up dead because they're wearing inappropriate clothing. So from one of the annual reports, this is CAIR. So again, they look how they frame it. You are unwelcome and excluded. They want Muslims to believe that they are, that we are the bad guys. We're treating them badly. We don't welcome them. This is how they frame everything. So this woman, after she decided to wear a niqab to work, so she wasn't originally, her boss said, you look like an Arabian Night. Well, look, she did. She's wearing this thing that's just the eyes, okay? And that's just, you know, when you see an Arabian Night, he's probably making a joke. People joke, you know, at least in the West, they used to joke. And I have been called some incredible things at work, really, okay? I don't file a lawsuit over it. All right. One time I was called an orangutan. I would say, you look like an orangutan. It was a bad hair day. What can I say? But anyway, and not only that, they invited her to a Christmas celebration and she didn't want to go. They are just trying to be friendly. Anybody can come to a Christmas celebration. Everybody is welcome. That is what Christmas is like. Very welcoming. Come. Right? We try to share it with people, not trying to press anything on them, just hope they have a piece of cake and a good time. But anyway, the Quran says multiple times that Muslims should not take unbelievers as friends. And there are complaints with Muslims complaining about nativity scenes in French hospitals. This is something that has been done for hundreds of years, but they don't like it. And why don't they like it? Here's an imam in Canada, and this is his talk, and he says, there are those who will say to them, that's a non-Muslim, Merry Christmas. By saying that, you are approving of it. If a person, a Muslim, were to commit every major sin, commit adultery, dealing with interest, lying, murder, if a person were to do all those major sins, they are nothing compared to the sin of congratulating and greeting non-Muslims on their false festivals. I mean, is this going to create problems at work? They want to invite you to come and have a good time, a little bit of fun, and this is taken as an insult to Allah. This is just, how do you deal with this? So here's an example of a woman who was denied employment. She goes to the interview and she is wearing a hijab, and they say, we have a specific look policy and we don't want religious garb on the front desk. Anyway, she didn't get the job for that reason. And of course, she went to CAIR and it went to court. And she won. Now, here is this article, and this is the point. This is what I really take exception to. And this is this lie that this is in favor of women everywhere. Wearing a hijab is not a mark of freedom. What the Quran says is that women should wear some kind of a covering so that they will be known and not be abused. So that puts a mark on all unveiled women, that they are available to be abused. They are now identified. The Muslims are protected. They're known as Muslims, and others are not. And we see this happening. Here's an example from Austria. And this is a former MP saying that there are areas of Austria where women who are not Muslim are putting on veils so they will not be assaulted. It's a national security risk. So at work, we see it's called religion. We've seen that repeatedly, demanding religious accommodation. And in this case, the woman had been there for 12 years, no problem. But she had a frontline position, and she was required to wear a uniform, and decided after 12 years that she wanted to wear a hijab to work. And they said, no, we have a uniform and we can give you another job. So they were really good about it. They said, we'll give you another job. You'll get the same pay, the work schedule, benefits. And she rejected the transfer. So sure enough, she goes to CAIR, and CAIR complains and said that they refused to accommodate her, but they had tried, right? So he spent $100,000 defending the company from this. You can see, I mean, she lost, the company lost, everybody lost. So at schools, it's called culture. Now we've seen over and over and over when there are demands being made to accommodate, legislation, accommodate at work, they call it religion. Because if you go to there's no protected status for culture. If they go to work and they say, well, this is my culture, I'm supposed to wear it, they're not going to get it. So it's religious. But you're not allowed to have religion in school. Okay, so in Canada, the schools, you're supposed to keep the religion out. And it says that schools, provincial schools, must be conducted on the strictly secular and non-sectarian principle. And there must be no dogma or creed, no religious stuff, right? But they're bringing it into schools, and now they call it culture. So you can imagine if you went to a school and you wanted to hang a crucifix on the children, we'll have crucifix day and hang crucifixes on them. Or we'll have, what is it, a kippah. We'll be hanging kippahs on little
Quran
boys.
burning day. We should have that one.
A what day?
Quran burning day.
Well, this is ridiculous. That pounds and pounds of material is being sent to the schools about Islamophobia and how important the culture is, and to wear these. This is grooming. And on TikTok, it's fashion. And in Afghanistan, it is oppression. That's when they were still allowed on the street.
It's just a slippery slope. That's all it
sure
is.
So now we're on to halal and the food. What is forbidden? The flesh of swine. Whoever is forced by severe hunger with no inclination to sin, Allah is forgiving and merciful. This is the principle of Darura. So Kentucky Fried Chicken did not have to make all of its chicken. And, that chicken is not on the list here. They didn't have to go halal, but they have gone halal. And why have they gone halal? Well, when you go to halal, there is now this burgeoning market, this enormous, 2 billion Muslims in the world who will go, oh, it's halal. And the others, they don't care, right? But this is an economic system that is being introduced unnecessarily and imposed on everyone. So from the Hadith, it says some people in the end, will consider illegal sexual intercourse the wearing of silk, So silk is not halal. The drinking of alcohol and the use of musical instruments. Well, this is haram. According to the doctrine, the musical instruments are haram, that they will consider this lawful. Well, they'll be punished. Allah will destroy them, but they're punished in this life. This young boy, 15 years old, in Iraq, and he was beheaded because he was listening to Western music. This is how far it can go. Okay? So I don't see why anyone in the West should be accommodating halal, because that's where it ends up, and it isn't good for Muslims either. So there are demands, though, for halal-only meals in staff canteens, in the public schools, and the parents were very upset about this. Conflicts with secular policies, criticism of favoritism, but it's everywhere. And it's not just food, it's clothing as well. farm to fork. So right from the farm all the way through the processing till it's on your plate, they want it all halal. And you realize what that does to employment, to the workforce. So gender segregation. This one's very interesting. Very interesting. Okay.
Let me show something for a moment that I think would be just so, because you spoke about Qurans, and let me just show my screen. Guys, this you need to, some discretion here. This is someone called Farkunda Malikzada. She was murdered in Kabul for apparently desecrating a Quran. She did something. You can see here people behind her, and they're about to throw bricks on her. She was murdered.
Oh no, is this the one that ended up burned?
Yeah, and they ended up dragging her behind a car.
Yeah.
The skin was torn off, and then they ended up burning her to death. This is what Islam does. This is what Muslims do.
It's really bad. Please don't show the last one. It's too much.
This is horrific.
It's incredible.
Please understand, this is the end of that slippery slope.
It was a lie. She had not damaged the Quran. It finally came out in the end that she had not damaged the Quran. She had not committed any blasphemy. They had been arguing over the price of some beads or something, and he just came out with this.
No, the problem is, in the Sharia, under the laws of Sab al-Rasul, which is insulting the Prophet, under the series of laws about insulting Islam, a Muslim that fails to believe the charge is guilty of apostasy and is also then liable to be killed. So therefore, when the charge is made, when the accusation is leveled against someone for this kind of desecration or blasphemy, then everyone else has to believe them, or you or yourself are guilty of the crime. This is the messed up nature of the Sharia, the violent, barbaric, primitive nature of the Sharia. You need to understand there's no bottom to the depravity.
There's no bottom. There's no bottom. What happened to that woman? My God. And this huge mob forms. You know, there's nobody trying to help her. And it was a lie to start with.
Yes.
It is just, it's.
So this is why we cannot allow.
Why we do what we do.
To continue. The truth. All we can do as individuals is speak the truth. Speak the truth. Reveal the facts. Don't let them silence you. And the truth will overcome the lie. There is not enough darkness in the whole world to put out the light of one small candle. But we, together, we can be thousands and millions of candles. And that's a lot of light. So just speak the truth. And eventually the truth will, once people find out, there'll be a flood, a tidal wave. Islam cannot survive.
I hope so. You know, but they won't let you show stuff like that. They won't let you show what is really happening. And this is really working against the non-Islamic countries. It blows my mind that we are not showing the truth to people, because this, I would not wish this on anyone, anywhere. It's just incredible to me, and it's done at the drop of a hat.
Yeah. And Second Shaitan says, thank you very much again for your donation. He says, ban dawah, imams and sheikhs.
Exactly.
Dawah. Islam must be destroyed. I believe that it needs to be declared.
Yeah.
On the same
by
level
everyone, Muslims too. And so many of them want to throw it off, the ones that are in the Islamic country. And of course, the problem with Islam is the power is all given. The power is given to the worst of society. It is given to cruel mullahs. It is given to vicious jihadis. Those are the ones that have the highest power. They're the ones that are supposed to go to paradise. This is crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'll get back to my presentation. All right. So gender segregation, and here's looking at the doctrine. It says, when you ask your wives for something, ask them from behind a partition. Well, what a marriage, eh? I suppose. But actually, this isn't between a man and his wife, of course. It's between wives and anybody else, like we were saying in Afghanistan. And it says the best rows for men are the first rows, and the best rows for women are the last rows. So this is gender segregation. So how does that play out in the workplace? Well, very badly. So that People don't shake hands. They won't take instructions. I need another drink. So the French airlines, I just give a few examples. There are thousands, okay? The French airlines, the male employees were refusing to take instructions from female employers. But just to give a few examples, a Muslim porter at a hotel in Venice refused to take instructions from his female supervisor. In Paris, a group of female bus drivers revealed that male Muslim drivers refused to shake hands and refused to drive a bus that had been driven by a woman on the previous shift. Okay, a woman sat in this chair. I'm not sitting in it. Hamilton, Ontario, there was a visiting dignitary from the Middle East, and women in Canada were told to wear long sleeves and not shake hands with him. Can you imagine? Anyway, so this is another lovely gentleman here, and he has written a book about the school in Germany. Now, his name's Christian Klar, and it's in German, but he gave me the book in English. And from the book, it says, while male teachers are still in a relatively good position, and they aren't really, compared to what? Women sometimes have to endure massive hostility. When students want to insult or offend us, they usually do so using sexualized foul language. Now you can see it here. I am not going to read it because that will get the video taken down or off. And the words are foul. I won't say them. Okay. Terrible things they call the women, the teachers. She was also repeatedly confronted with calls such as Allahu Akbar. Do you like Islam? Do you like Muslims? If she gives a bad grade or if someone had to hand in their cell phone, almost always the students played the racism card and their parents would get involved. It's incredible how bad the school system is. One of the cases mentioned, the school got a call, one of the schools got a call from a parent saying they were thinking about registering their German daughter there. And how many Austrians were there at the school because they're so outnumbered now. And they said, if you register your daughter, she will be the only one. The students are coming to school. They speak Arabic only because their parents speak Arabic only. They've never even learned English. They don't use it. It's impossible to teach them. They go home, they speak Arabic again. And they sometimes say they don't need to learn German because the shops they go to are all Islamic shops and they speak Arabic. And in many of the schools, the German children are actually called names. They have a nasty name for a German child, that you're German, and it's kind of, it's just derogatory. You're a German, and so they get called names because they're German. So on to pork and alcohol. So 20% of managers complained of overt religiosity, refusing to carry out a task, okay? So what the doctrine says, forbidden to you are, and whoever is forced, no problem. And again, with intoxicants, okay? So alcohol, that you may be successful. Nothing about anybody else. It says every intoxicant is forbidden. He who drinks wine in this world won't get it in the hereafter. So fine. But how is that being translated at work? How is that being translated in those booklets we saw? Because we've just seen the Quran. The Quran very clearly says you, right? And this is also, this is a hadith here. Now, this woman had been working for a year and a half, as a flight attendant until she took a closer look at what is and is not permitted in her newly found faith, okay? So she's a recent convert. So what's she doing? Is she reading the Quran? Likely not. Is she reading one of those pamphlets? Possibly. So she says her faith doesn't even permit her to serve alcohol to others. Well, it does not say that. So she reached out to CAIR, and it all went to court. And that's because the complaint was made initially believe it or not, the company went along with that. Now, nobody is going to take a job as an airline hostess and not realize that serving alcohol is part of the job. Of course, they serve drinks on planes. So when after a year and a half, she decided not to do this anymore, one of her coworkers had to do it for her. But then when she started working with another person, that person would not do it for her, and she made a complaint. This isn't reasonable. It is not fair to coworkers. Oh, and I forgot this other example here was a German retail chain. The woman refused to handle pork or alcohol. So she's standing at a cash register in a German retail store, and she won't handle the alcohol or the pork. Well, that's not a job for her then. But the doctrine doesn't say that.
Yeah, but she's imposing the Sharia. She's commanding the right and forbidding the
Exactly.
wrong. She's applying the Sharia on non-Muslims.
Yeah. So how far this goes is quite incredible, and we need to consider that. Absolutely.
We just need to fire these people, tell them, look, you comply. Look, I mean, what about airlines? What about Middle Eastern airlines that serve alcohol? I mean, are their air hostesses all going to hell?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. The point is to Islamize a Western country. All right. So it's highly organized from the top. There is a goal. Yeah. Once that goal is reached, then they'll do what they want. But reaching the goal is the point. So here we have in a hospital, patients refusing to eat with their left hand now for religious reasons. Now, what does the Quran say? Well, the Quran, beards are a big thing. The Quran has no requirement whatsoever to grow a beard. Keep that in mind. Quran does not say you have to wear a beard. Yeah, it does say you have to wash your face, etc. Right. Well, Muhammad did it. Yeah. The Hadith says cleanliness is half a face. So we'll get to the beard and the Hadith on the next page. But here we have, according to Sharia, and to get it all on one page here, I went to Islam questions and answers, because otherwise I'd have 20 Hadith here to show you. So established principle in Sharia is that which has to do with honor and nobility, such as exiting a toilet, entering a mosque. You do that with your right hand, okay? Anything that is the opposite, okay, dishonorable, such as exiting a mosque or entering a toilet, you do that on your left. So if his hand is incapacitated, his right hand, he refuses to eat with the left and demands that the nurse do it. Well, look at what that does to the other. Oh, I haven't got to it yet, have I? Oh, maybe I already passed it. But the point is, he won't eat. What does that do to the hospital now? All the other patients are waiting while nurses are required to feed patients because these booklets go out. And this is to a hospital in, now where was this one? That one was in Australia. No, this one is for British Columbia, actually. There's another one I have later from Australia. And they're telling the hospital how they need to be looked after. And some hospitals, staff are not washing properly because they refuse to move their sleeves up. Or if during Ramadan, they make sure that nobody eats in front of a Muslim. So if there's two people in a room and one isn't a Muslim, that's a problem now. They're eating. So it's being imposed on people. So people are wearing flip-flops to the office. Male patients are refusing cleansing by female nurses, and it's straining hospital staff, leading to patient care delays. Now we'll get to the beard, because it's not in the Quran. It's in the Hadith. All right. And Muhammad said, Jews and Christians do not dye their beards, so act differently from them. Now, this case is a boxer. Now, boxing regulations are that you must be clean shaven. Well, if they want an exception for religious purposes, okay, they can get a waiver, but they have to apply for each one individually. Well, this fellow had several matches in one day, and he didn't want to have to apply for each one. He wanted an exemption given to him for the whole day, a waiver for the whole day. And they said, no, you have to apply for each one. So he took it to court. He went to CAIR and he said, they won't give me a waiver for the whole day. Now, they would have given him waivers one at a time. Everybody's got to do the same thing. Anyway, so he took it to court. But why isn't he dyeing his beard if that's so important? All right, pick and choose. Umar dyed his beard yellow. He said, I saw the Prophet dye his beard yellow. We also saw him dyeing it red. And Umar trimmed his beard. Now, the thing is, we're not equipped to recognize what is a social signature, signifier. So if something is extreme, we don't know if it's extreme, if it's normal, we have no idea, right? But in the Muslim world, they do. And the Muslim Brotherhood wears a full but well-groomed beard. The Salafists like to let their beard grow wild, showing that they want to follow the doctrine very closely. So some will even dye their beards. But Mubarak in Egypt recognized that these beards were sort of getting a gathering. It's like we're a team. We've all got the really bushy beards, right? And he considered this a threat, okay? So he forbid these growing of beards. And this is in an Islamic country. So why are we saying that it's a religious obligation? It's not in the Quran, and in Islamic countries, they're forbidding it. But now civil servants are calling it, a matter of civil rights and freedom of expression. Now, an example of this is there was this man with his father, and they ran into an old friend, and she didn't shake his hand. And later, the father said to her, why didn't you shake my son's hand? And she said she assumed that his facial hair was symbolic of a deep Islamic religiousness, and she was afraid if she offered her hand that he wouldn't take it. So Tajikistan is fighting down on extremism by getting rid of beards and hijabs. And these are Islamic countries. They're seeing them as political. Okay. So physical contact, 26% of managers reported refusal of contact with a coworker. And the doctrine says, abide in your houses, do not display yourselves. And Allah only desires to keep uncleanliness away from you, and that polytheists are unclean. That's all non-Muslims. The Hadith say Muhammad never touched the palm of a woman. And the Hadith also says a woman should not travel unless she has an unmarriageable man with her. And how is that working in the workforce? Well, in Holland, a woman was refusing to shake hands with her female employees and citing religious reasons. And of course, this goes to court, as did this Muslim woman. Yeah, no, that one didn't go to court. This one went to court in Sweden. And she had gone to an interview and she refused to shake hands when the interview was over. And they said, well, that's not going to go so well at work. If you don't want to shake hands with us, we're a very friendly group here. And so, no, they didn't give her the job. And this was just an interview. So they would have interviewed other people as well, right? She took that to court, and the company was ordered to pay $6,000 in compensation. But it does cause problems. Here's an example from a school board, the school district. And there was a fellow who was refusing to shake hands with any of his female coworkers. And yes, they took offense. But there were other issues as well, okay? He had poor attendance. He lacked interpersonal skills. He wasn't as responsive as was needed, etc. So when the time came to lay off people, as it did, a number of people were laid off, and so was he. But he said, no, you're doing this because of Islam. You're doing it because I'm a Muslim. This is racism. He takes it to court. And the court ultimately ruled for the school district. And here we have the book from Australia, telling hospitals how to treat Muslim patients. And here we have its video, doctors being trained in towel slapping to prevent attacks from Muslim migrants. In France, that's Germany, in France, 2 gynecologist obstetricians were caring for Muslim women giving birth. They were physically attacked and injured, okay, because the husband said that the male doctor should not have examined their wives. Now, in Afghanistan now, women are not allowed to go to school. They're not allowed to be doctors. The women are not allowed to be seen by males. In other words, women in Afghanistan now have no medical care at all. None. So 30 years ago, they say, Muslim women attended our hospitals with no fear of being cared for by male doctors. Why this regression? Why? Well, because Islam is getting stronger. and we're helping it get stronger. Proselytizing. 19% of managers complained of overt religiosity, such as proselytizing in the workplace. Now, the Quran does say that you should try to bring people to Islam, and the Hadith say you should convey my teachings, but it also says that you should not take the disbelievers as friends unless basically it is a matter of deception, that you're pretending to be a friend. So the proselytizing in the workplace is causing tension. And this is a UK call center that they were frequently discussing religion, and it's a problem in sports centers, schools, jails, etc. And vehicles these are vehicles for proselytizing and radicalization. And I'm going to mention one, and I'm trying to remember which country it was in. A young girl.
Elaine, are you going to?
Yep.
How much longer do you? We're 5 minutes,
Okay.
2 hours.
Okay. I won't talk about that one then.
No, how much? No, how much longer? How many more slides
I
do
think.
you have?
Well, there were 10, so we're on 9 now.
Okay.
I won't mention. Anyway, she complained that the students in her class were talking too much about Islam. She was killed. Anyway, so this is a young boy, and he's in a British school. And he's being converted to Islam. It's peer pressure. He's saying the Shahada right there. He doesn't even know what Islam is. And here we have Quebec schools. And Quebec is actually taking some steps right now against this. 11 teachers were suspended, introducing Sharia in the school. Now, this is the last one, Jihad. So Jihad, 95% of employers find this a problem.
Elaine?
Yep.
Well, rather than rushing, let's rather call it here. It's just under 2 hours, so that's, I think, a fair chunk of time. And
it is long.
Time. So it's gone longer than we originally discussed. So let's
a lot longer. Shouldn't have slowed me down, Lloyd. Yeah. I knew it was a long one. Yeah.
Also, okay, yeah. So then let's do that. I mean, that is really, it shows the tactics, the methods, the tools, the strategies they're using, and I think we need to be aware of this and push back. We need to highlight these things, and there are things we can do, practical things. We can also just learn to say no. I'm sure they're going to push back, but we just need to do what we can. And at some point, we need to provide this information to employers and government agencies and so on to show that you can fight back, should fight back, and also where this leads and why we are fighting back.
For those who might not make it back to the second one, I will just make the point that jihad is more of a religious obligation than a beard. So when are the human rights tribunals going to tell us, using the same criteria, it's their religious right, that we should just lie down and be killed? It's the same criteria. Anyway, we'll talk more about it next time.
Okay, yeah. So guys, thanks very much then. This has been really educational. And so, yeah, we will be back. We'll plan a date to finish this discussion. And I look forward to seeing your comments later on in the comment section. And for the Muslims, again, I mean, if Sharia is so amazing, why are Muslims so unwilling to speak about it? Why do they have to lie about it? Why are they so unwilling to go through the Sharia texts and discuss all of these things in detail to prove to us how it is so much better than anything that comes out of the West or comes out of Christianity?
And why is the only compassion for women in Afghanistan coming from non-Muslims? When anything goes on LinkedIn about those people, the male Muslims come on and defend it. They will ignore what is happening and talk about this is for their protection.
Well,
it's calling.
Muslims have been coming out to decry the murder of Salwan Momika. You only see them justifying it, which means all of Islam is radical. There's no such thing as radical Islam. There's only Islam.
There's only Islam.
And it's false to pretend that it's a different breed or species of Islam that's different to normal Islam. Look, normal Islam is fine. Let's invite in all the normal people and all the normal Muslims and let's practice just that radical stuff on them. It is all radical.
Great. So it's all set up to be opposite to everybody else. And it's done so deliberately so that the conflict never ends.
Yeah. So good night, everyone, and we'll see you guys soon. I'll be back tomorrow with some DAC Talk. We will be discussing our next, I think, part 12 on the comedy show that is the Quran. So,
Do I just click leave here? What do I do? Click leave.
yeah. Well, I'll end it here then. Take care, guys.
All
Yeah.
right.
Good night,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone. Thank you for hanging in there.